Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody who's asked questions relating to my Appalachian Trail Thru Hike. I will try and get to as many as I can, but what I've decided to do is batch them together, and this video is really covering those major items that a UK-based hiker has to face before they get to the US. There are quite a lot of other items to cover, but they are more trail specific. So I'm going to cover 5 broad areas, sort of trail basics for a UK hiker, and these are your visa, your flight, insurance, brackets health insurance, your mobile phone, and money. And hopefully if I cover those 5 areas, it'll give people a good starting point before they get to a trail. The basics of walking a trail and what you carry in a pack are pretty similar the world over, but these 5 areas are specific to UK hikers making an attempt on a long trail in the US. So the first item is a visa. Now I'll start this off by saying I'm not a visa lawyer or an expert on visas. This is just my experience of what I needed and investigating what I needed. I think a point that people the world over misunderstand is that you can have a visa, but it doesn't actually mean you'll get into the country. The decision, the final decision, is made by that person you meet at immigration control. And it's up to them to decide. You've got a 6-month visa, yes, but they'll only give you 4 months. It's for them to decide. But for all of these things to do with gaining a visa to the US Embassy website has loads of information about it, and I wouldn't use any other website. The US Embassy website covers everything that you need to do. Now, if you go and visit the US, or if you're a US person coming to the UK, generally speaking, it's pretty easy to get a tourist visa for 3 months. That's the sort of standard 90-day, I think it is rather than 3 month, 90-day visa. And you don't really have to give an awful lot of information to gain that visa. The issue at hand is that the AT or PCT or CDT, whatever it is, one of these really long trails, they will take 5 to 7 months. So the basic 90-day visa just won't cover it. On my particular Appalachian Trail experience, I did hear of I think it was a German lady who decided to come in on a normal 90-day visa, leave the US and come back again immediately, getting another 90-day tourist visa. Now, number of points on that one. One, yeah, technically it's possible, because as I say, each time you enter the US, it's actually for the immigration officer on duty on the day to decide whether you're allowed in. And there is no prescribed period of time that you have to be absent from the US before you can re-enter the US. And as I say, that's the same pretty much the world over. Now, I did hear of this one German lady who tried this, but she actually failed in her attempt to come back on a second 3-month visa, because presumably the immigration official didn't think she was actually going to leave the country. So my advice, if you're going to do one of these long trails, and this is exactly what I did, is to go and put an application in for what they call a B2 visa, which is a tourist visa for up to 6 months. It's a administrative exercise. There's a lot of information you have to fill in. There's not much on there that's particularly difficult to fill in. And whilst there are many questions you might have about what it is, the best source of information I found was actually the FAQs on the US Embassy website. The bottom line is that they do want you to visit. They're just trying to weed out people who are not there to visit. My personal experience of the B2 visa, the B2 visa gives you essentially 6 months, 186 days, or whatever it is, access to the US on a tourist non-working visa. So the B2 process is online. It's pretty long. You can save your entry and come back to it later. But I started an entry and then realized actually there was quite a lot of information I needed that I didn't have, so I stopped it and then restarted it. But essentially what it leads to is, having filled it in, you then need an interview at the US Embassy. My advice is to book an interview as soon as you can. And people like me were fairly unfortunate in one sense, in that following the COVID sort of lockdown, it's pretty clear the US Embassy concentrated on work visas. Well, that's fair enough. So when I was able to arrange an interview off their calendaring system, to be honest, I just pressed next and took what I was given, which happened to be an interview at 8 a.m. on a Monday. I say, my own experience, getting to the embassy, getting in the embassy, getting upstairs to the area where you have your interview, getting in a queue for the interview, that took a good 30 minutes. But once you're in your queue for your interview and you have a little ticket that tells you what your number is and it flashes up on a screen, you just have to wait for your interview. Now, I was lucky that mine was an 8 a.m. interview, but I did chat to somebody who went for I think it was 11 o'clock interview and didn't actually get seen until 1, so be prepared for that. But my interview was at 8 a.m. I got to the US Embassy at 7:30 in the morning. I took loads of paperwork with me. They didn't ask me one question other than what I wanted it for, and I said to walk the Appalachian Trail, and they said okay, and I was out of the building by 8:20. So I was very lucky in that respect. But that's the first thing for a UK resident to consider, is a visa. There is nothing stopping you going on a normal tourist 90-day visa, but that's if you want to do a section. If you're going to do the whole thing, I would recommend a B2 visa. The second subject for a sort of UK resident are flights. There are some basic sort of pointers, do you get a one-way flight? Do you get a return flight? What is clear is, if you do have a B2 visa, I checked this with the US Embassy, but if you do have a B2 visa, you don't need a return ticket. So you do have the option of buying a one-way ticket or buying a return ticket. As it refers to a no-bow hiker, which is what I was, I would say 99.9% of people fly into Atlanta and from there make their way to their first night accommodation and then onto the trail. I can't speak to a section hiker or a SOBO as to where they would land. There are so many airports in the US, and it's probably fairly easy to find an airport close to whatever your section hike is, or whatever your flip-flop is, or whatever your SOBO experience is. What I can say is, almost regardless of the ticket people bought, almost everybody flew back from either Boston or New York. As it refers to my experience and what I did, I actually bought a one-way ticket to the US. I didn't really want to consider, whilst I was hiking, at any point having to contact a airline company or travel agent and change my departure point and my departure time. So I decided I would buy a one-way ticket. I flew into Atlanta. When I got to immigration, essentially just waved me through, and the guy did say that I was the 10th person that day who was doing the AT. So I think they were fairly used to, at certain times of the year, quite a lot of people coming through the airport for that purpose. On the way home, I bought a one-way ticket coming out of Boston. The sort of time sequence for me was that I summited on the Monday, ended up in Bangor on Monday night. Tuesday morning, I bought a plane ticket and then took a bus to Boston, where I stayed with some friends. And on Wednesday evening, I had the flight out to the UK, so I arrived in the UK on Thursday morning. So for me, it was, I summited on the Monday and I was home by the Thursday morning. Of all those that I knew on the trail that had return tickets, to Europe, whether it's Belgium or Germany or the UK, pretty much all of them had issues changing the return date or the departure airport. I have no idea what type of return ticket they bought, because obviously you can buy some quite flexible return tickets which are expensive, but all of them stayed for a minimum of sort of 5 to 14 days after summiting. And some of those 5 to 14 days were with friends or trail angels, so it didn't really cost them anything. But clearly in that period, you know, there's food to buy, and when they do need to buy accommodation, there's accommodation to buy. So maybe my ticket, which was just over £500 one way, equates in some way to the extra expenditure they incurred. But as I say, there is no requirement to have a return ticket. I bought 2 one-way tickets. It worked for me. I think if I did it again, I would do exactly the same again and buy a one-way ticket each way. Third sort of subject for UK residents to consider if they're going out to the US to do one of these long trails is insurance. Now, there are 2 camps in insurance, and this is just exactly the same as whether you go on a 1-week holiday to Greece or whether you go on a 6-month holiday to the Far East, or you do a 5-month trekking excursion to South America. You either buy travel and medical insurance or you don't. I'm always been in the camp that I do, because it's there is a risk involved, and particularly for the US, with the potential cost of healthcare coming from a country where if I needed to go to accident and emergency, I would just turn up on the door and you'd be dealt with, not having to worry about how much it costs, have I got insurance, all that sort of stuff. So for me, it was a no-brainer to buy travel insurance. That included medical insurance. Now, there are various websites to do with backpacker insurance, and I looked at all of those. What was pretty clear, I'm 60, there is clearly a break point at 59, because I investigated it a year ago, 2 years ago, and when I finally bought the insurance, when I changed the, when I got to being 60, yeah, it was a bit more expensive, but everything's online. There are multiple providers. I probably got 4 or 5 different quotes online, and decided upon one. I kept a PDF of the insurance documents on my mobile, and I kept images of the main pages as photographs that were marked as favourites so I could find them quickly. So I did get travel insurance, I did get medical insurance. I didn't make use of either, but that's part of insurance. The 4th item that I think UK residents need to consider is their phone. Now, for me, I took all my videos and pictures on my iPhone. I don't own a GoPro, don't particularly need a GoPro. So the phone for me was the important electronic device that I would take with me. I bought my iPhone quite a few years ago direct, because I was concerned that if I ever was to go abroad and wanted to get a SIM, they would want an unlocked phone in order to make it work. So I had actually bought my own phone. Obviously time passes, and what you're able to do with eSIMs and everything else, that changes. But I'm with a provider in the UK called EE, and in the period between buying my phone and going to the US, EE introduced an extension to your UK plan, such that the minutes and the texts and everything else that you have as part of your plan in the UK would count, be exactly the same, be extended to, I don't know what the correct phrase is, to the US. So for a nominal amount, which was £10 a month. So for £10 a month, I can extend my mobile phone to work in the US. That seemed a pretty sort of a no-brainer to me. So that's what I did. I didn't get a separate SIM card in the US. I didn't get an eSIM, didn't get anything like that. All I got was an extension to my current contract to work in the US. Once I was in the US, what it was clear was that EE first connect to AT&T. And the only reason I know that is people I was with on the trail who were US citizens and had mobile contracts with US companies, a lot of them were with Verizon, and when they connected to Verizon, I was connecting to AT&T. And then when they connected to Verizon, the next one I was able to connect to was T-Mobile. And finally, when I couldn't get AT&T or T-Mobile, I connected to Verizon. So I pretty much had access, more access than my colleagues in the US. However, the access was never strong enough to upload any videos. So I needed a Wi-Fi connection in a hotel or a hostel to upload videos. Two extra points on mobile phones. One is cell reception and one is battery. Cell reception, what's pretty clear as you get closer to the larger conurbations like New York and Washington, there is loads of cell coverage and there's no real issue. Pretty much everywhere along the trail when you get to a mountain top, I was able to get cell service. Yes, there are odd times when you don't, but pretty much a lot of the time, except for in Maine, which is its own sort of cell reception issue. About 50% of the time, I don't know, I didn't keep a count, but it felt like that. About 50% of the time, I had enough cell reception at shelters to browse, to message, and watch YouTube videos. Not to do much more. I couldn't download anything, but to be able to send a couple of messages is fine. Pretty much every town I stopped at had good cell reception, regardless of the fact that I might be using the Wi-Fi in the hotel or the hostel, except for some towns in Maine. So in terms of being able to connect, yeah, you're out there in the woods. I didn't expect to be able to connect as much as I did. Top of mountains, yes, it seems logical as to why you could be able to. And really Maine is really only the sort of the cell reception black spot there is, but then when you discover how much of Maine is covered by forest and how far north it is and remote it is, and you begin to understand. And the second sort of subsection was battery. I always had my phone on airplane mode all day. I don't use Spotify, so I've no idea how that impacts the battery usage, but my cell phone battery would start the day at about 60-70% and finish the day at about 20 to 30%. I always turn my phone off at night. I didn't quite see the point of having it on whilst I was asleep, particularly as if you don't have cell reception at a shelter, what's the point of having a mobile phone on? So I would turn mine off every night, and that clearly saved battery power. When I was using my battery pack to recharge my iPhone, I never let it go beyond 70% before disconnecting it. When I was in town, then sure, I would charge my phone to 100%, but actually from my battery pack, I'd never get it beyond 70%. And throughout the day, looking at far out, taking images, taking videos, sending odd messages, it would go from 70% down to 30, 35, which was enough. And the 10,000 battery pack that I had was enough to recharge it up to 70% 4 or 5 times. So really I never had an issue with mobile phone battery. The final item that is useful for a sort of UK hiker going to the US to consider is money. Obviously you can get US dollars as actual paper currency. One subtle difference with the US is all their notes are the same size and the same colour. Coming from a country where they're a different size and a different colour, yeah, that's slightly different. But you can pay for anything on your credit card, on a bank card, or if you're lucky enough to have a US bank account, on a card related to that bank account. But each of these has different pros and cons, and I didn't use any of them. For the last decade, I have used a currency card all around the world. It's the same card, it's a Travelex card. You store multiple different currencies on the card, or you can. I've only ever stored euros and dollars and Swiss francs on it. but there are other currencies you can store on it. So when you present your card to a shop or a restaurant, it identifies as a MasterCard. It looks at what your US dollar balance is, and from there works out whether you can pay. So if you've got 3 different currencies on your card and you've only got $34 identified as dollars and you want to pay something for $50, it'll fail even if you've got £1,000 and 6,000 euros on that card as well. The way it works is you have this currency card and you upload currency to it in a lump. So I would essentially transfer from a bank account, a UK bank account, £1,000, which would give me about $1,200 at the current exchange rates. And that $1,200, that's what I'd be spending. So I only have one exchange hit. I have no other charges. I realise the exchange rate you get covers whatever charges they want to charge. But I load up the card with £1,000 and say that I want it to be in my dollar bucket. So it converts it to $1,200. I have an app on my phone that I can see everything that I'm paying, and obviously with the app on the phone you can disable the card if ever you want. So if you happen to lose the card, you could disable it. You could just transfer all the dollars to sterling or to euros, and it would then not work in the US because there are no dollars to pay out from. The actual card itself was okay in ATMs. Slightly different ATMs in the US in that your card doesn't seem to disappear from view when you put it in the slot. Quite a lot of ATMs in the UK, your card disappears. So that's quite good, so you don't feel as if you're going to lose your card and have it eaten by the machine. I did have to insert my PIN, particularly at hotels. A couple of restaurants, but particularly at hotels, so whether or not their payment systems don't like it, I've no idea, but once I'd input the PIN, everything was fine. You will need cash on the trail. I carried about $100 to $150 with me at all time, and the reason I used ATMs is fewer and fewer outlets gave cashbacks, and those that did, they would charge you, and for me that was a cost. For people in the US, their personal banking refunds a lot of those charges, but for me it would be a charge. There's then the challenge every now and again of one of your family buys a hotel room and there are 4 of you in it. How do you pay for it? Well, one thing to note, Venmo, which is a popular app, requires a US bank account, which you don't have. Well, it's very easy on a hotel to go to reception and say, can I pay a quarter of the bill, can I pay half the bill on this card, and they will do it. PayPal works perfectly fine. You can attach this particular currency card to your PayPal account, you can pay that way, or as happened quite a lot with families I was part of, I paid one week, somebody else paid another week. You have a mental note of what it is. It works out as a net payment of $10 and you just give somebody $10 cash. So money, the big thing about money for me is I took one currency card with me which had US dollars on it. And yes, I did have an emergency credit card that I carried with me, never used it. I also didn't have an issue of each transaction that I had attracting a separate exchange rate or a separate charge for that transaction, which my credit card in the UK would do. So those are the 5 main items that I would say a UK person has to consider before they even go out and do one of these large trails. Your visa, your flights, your insurance, your mobile phone, and money. So that's it, the 5 sort of major areas a UK-based hiker needs to consider before they're going to the US. Hopefully that's given you some useful tips and useful things to think about yourself. But the next few videos will be on trail-specific items, and again I'll try and batch together similar type questions so that there is some logic to the videos. But thank you.